Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Gentleman's Standard. I'm Yorel Francis, and my co-host.
I am Cecil Burrows. Good afternoon, everyone.
Absolutely. We've been getting some really great feedback from the audience, and people are loving what we're saying. So we're back to say some more. Today's episode is the inner standard. What is a gentleman's inner standard? And let's kick it off.
So one of the things, and Uriel, when you brought this topic up for something that, from experience and individuals engaging with you that we should tackle, gave me pause for a second because this is getting us into spaces and places that you need to do, right? We talked about foundation elements that need to be considered as you're trying to build up a discipline standard. One of the key things that I wanted to make sure we get across to individuals that are dialing in, that are listening to the concepts that we're posing out, is there's not really a full one prescriptive answer and one way to do it from this standpoint. This is really getting below the surface as it relates to what we're trying to convey. Um, at its core, what we want to make sure we're getting across to everybody is an absence of a plan around how you approach building your own personal brand and the
Mhm.
etiquette surrounding that. You can really allow yourself to get comfortable and sloppy in relation to the ways that you go. And my goal here, and the reason I find it important for me to participate, is from a corporate based perspective. And corporate is a lot of things. It's a mindset, it's home office, it's engaging. There's a lot of battles that you fight on a consistent basis to get the job done. But one of the things that needs to happen is some kind of due diligence around how you show up on a
Mhm.
consistent basis. And we're trying to tackle all of that. In absence of a plan, you can have a comfortable, sloppy approach that no one tells you that you're in that space. Or the other side of the spectrum is completely being, I'm going to be here to dominate the room and eat what I kill and hunt with, and all those elements that are there, which is not conducive to the mentality of everyone trying to get ahead from a successful base perspective. It is, I'm the only one left at the top of the mountain, which people at the top of the mountain can say, but for us that are trying to survive in a particular space where we need to partner and execute, is not necessarily conducive to success, long-term success, at least in my humble opinion. I don't know your take on that.
Well, we live in a world where image and how we present is rewarded over substance. And so we can clearly have, let's take social media for example, this incredible, wonderful life in pictures. And when we come to the inner standard of what is the reality outside of the frame of those pictures, there is no standard. It's non-existent. And in a world where that is more the norm now than before, you find yourself just trying to wade through, how do I present? What am I bringing to the table that makes me my own, as they say, authentic self? And I think that goes back to what we've been harping about is your core inner foundation. And it's like with that, there is no need to beat your chest and present a facade of what you're not to the world. You're grounded in your own shoes. You stand in your own feet or on your own feet, and you don't have to keep up with the Joneses, so to speak. And I think that's, as human beings, it's a fine line that we walk. And that's why I was really excited for us to talk about, that inner workings of how we pursue our daily lives and maintaining that and walking that tightrope of trying to be authentic without seeming contrived. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the way and contrived is a perfect way to put this, right? The thoughts and the tactics that we're trying to convey. I think about a saying that I ran across when I was doing some things when I did some brand etiquette seminars with a few companies. One of the things that came across from one of the leaders I engaged with was external polish without internal discipline eventually collapses. And it speaks exactly to when you brought this topic up. I'm like, this is it, right? So you can really get all the outside trimmings together, which is not what we're trying to convey, that you go get an amazing suit or you go get an amazing outfit and you're going to be perceived next level. It is the plan and discipline that needs to occur. And without that, that polish means nothing, quite frankly. From that standpoint, what we're talking about is just due diligence around your grooming. I think one of the greatest challenges for men today is that we've mastered presentation before we've mastered alignment, right? We know how to look composed. We know how to sound successful, but internally, many of us are probably exhausted. And to a degree, the longer you do that, you're drifting and it catches up to you. And it's caught up to me in roles that I've been in. From that standpoint, if you don't master that alignment component, it challenges your strategy and plan and whether you had one or not. And that messes with your success that you're trying to accomplish, in my humble opinion.
And I think that it's okay to admit that something internally is off.
Hmm.
And I think that oftentimes there's a struggle with that, uh, admitting that we're burned, that we're tired, that we are at the end of the rope, or however you want to parse that. And I think that it boils down to discipline, focus, but also understanding that resetting is not a bad word. Refocusing is not a bad thing. Failing is not a bad thing. I think as long as you understand internally, you need to reset the clock, get back up, and start over again. And I think that's the part of the puzzle that we sometimes fail at.
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely agree with your point on that. I mean, so the one of the things and one of the ways as we were pulling this together that really resonated with me is the public versus private persona, right? And the ways that we look at it, I know the ways that I look at it from a corporate culture perspective, and corporate is bleeding into social media, it's bleeding into expectations that are tied in from that standpoint, and kind of perceived oversight and management around your internal brand and how you kind of manage that,
Mhm.
especially from an executive background perspective. We become very, very trapped in image. We do. I mean, I've talked about this. We've talked about this ad nauseum on the others, but people do get rewarded, quite frankly, based off composure versus being authentic, right? And a lot of folks approach the public versus uh, private persona in a way that how am I going to be perceived when people see me and think about my strategies and plans, et cetera, while ignoring that I've got to have my internal clock right, right? And that's you struggling in certain rooms. And that's where we talked about this, the imposter syndrome piece comes in play and creeps in. That are you even really qualified to be here? You're your own worst critic and you're talking yourself off of ledges and off of opportunities and things along those lines that can help you be successful in accomplishing your task. Social media doesn't help that. And it's normalized this whole masculinity that a lot of men are branding themselves before they actually have built themselves up, that we've seen from that standpoint. And that is where you end up in places in public where private you haven't gotten yourself right and your internal clock wound the right way to accomplish your goals and tasks. At least from my seat and the way I see it.
I think one of the things that has sort of pulled me along or grounded me, so to speak, is discipline as identity. Um, I remember I was having a conversation once with someone at work, and they made a really interesting point that I really never considered. And it was about wow, you're really sure of yourself and about yourself. And it wasn't something that I sat down and muddled over or thought, like I'm going to go be sure about myself. But when I walked away from that conversation, I was like, you know what? I understand what they mean. Because I think it's key to have discipline beyond motivation. I think it's key to keep promises to yourself. I think it's key to have your mantras, repetition when there's no applause. But it's like we do this and it's internal and it's not something, at least for me, that I press a button and do. It's like it's just a part of my being. If it's a way to describe it. And so when I was having that conversation with my coworker, it clicked to me that it's something that a lot of people don't do or don't have. That sense of self, that sense of discipline, that sense of standing back up, that sense of moving forward, rowing your own boat, however you want to phrase it. And it's something that it's clearly lacking in today's society.
Yeah, and the sense of self and where you play when you talk about the inner standard, right? So what this goes back to my point that I made just a little bit ago, which is what we don't want to have individuals pull away from our conversations is the only point is that image. If you nail the image component of everything we're talking about, everything else falls in line. Image, don't get me wrong, may open the door, but as you reference sense of self, character determines how long you stay in the room. And we talked about that before, first time, right? And that is internally having yourself right. By having yourself right, and I mean, we believe in presentation matters. We believe grooming matters. We've talked about that. We talked about the importance of not starting off on the wrong base, right? To succeed at whatever the target or goal may be. If you're going to take yourself a couple of steps back, you're not helping yourself out. If our overall goal is trying to make sure that you start on third base in a baseball game, that's our goal, man. Stop trying to fight to gain relevance to get to that third base by screwing yourself up all through sloppy habits and not necessarily building yourself up. So presentation matters, grooming matters, presence matters. We talked about command and presence and how you show up in certain rooms, but eventually the inner self component has to carry what the image has introduced to all those that you're talking about. Because at some point in time, you got to open your mouth. At some point in time, you have to articulate what you're trying to convey. And that's what we're talking about today and the importance that's there. Your outgoing self may open that door. We talk about being judged fast, et cetera, but your character determines how long you stay in a room. You got to pull that away.
And a good point to make is that discipline is not what you do when you feel strong, is what you do when you feel nothing at all. And I think that's when you work to steer the ship back on course. And again, as I said before, I think that's where a lot of us fail or come short of when we're trying to get that rudder back in place. And it's not something that's easy to do. We're human, and we flail.
Yeah.
But I firmly believe inner standards means inner discipline, and that inner discipline is what gets you beyond the status quo.
Yeah. I'll one of the things, just to kind of put a tactic out there that I leverage, right? And we're talking about discipline as it relates to public and private personas.
Hmm.
Like what kept me in places where I was able to address certain areas where I felt as though I didn't belong in a room from that standpoint. Early in my career, I faced that a lot. And actually, as I progressed role to role, and you show up in rooms generally the first time where you're trying to learn the constituents and others that you're going to be dealing with on a project, an initiative, et cetera, you generally tend to get that pang of, am I good enough? Have I done enough? I've been blessed professionally where I've been tapped for opportunities because people saw the work that I did.
Hmm.
I made sure that I showed my value over time. I was able to build things directly. I built teams to tackle problems that were unique to the company. But each and every time I entered into a different space, to be honest with you, there were times where I showed up in that space. Am I built for this? Are they going to see behind this veneer that, I'm trying to show them to win this deal and I've got all my stuff nailed down on how I show up, etc. But mentally, am I connected from an education-based perspective? Am I going to be respected? And it's quite frankly, being a minority in certain areas, you generally get your radar up and hackles up when you're engaging with folks. Are there some people in this room that think I'm lesser than because of how I may be? And you got to kind of get over yourself, quite frankly, in those spaces, because that's your body and your inferiority complex that you may run into trying to really trip you up. And once you start looking at your persona in two different ways, I saw myself in two different spaces. I talked about this before. When I got myself together, I would see an ego element that's like, okay, I've got myself taken care of. You're all the things I'm done. You should feel confident. You belong here. And then the other side was my critic. And you start challenging your critic from a standpoint of, do I have these things right? Am I well studied on the topic? Do I feel as though I can get my point across to these individuals? And have I made sure that the package and presentation that shows up in there, not the clothing that I'm in and the weaponizing of my closet and things along those lines, which quite frankly, I do think is important. All right. I'd be lying to you if I didn't feel as such. But the fact that I made sure 100% that you cannot use that against me. And that's the way I approach it, right? I can be in, $2, a $2 outfit, but still get my point across from $1,000,000 because I brought the value, I brought the expectation, I brought the seriousness, and I eliminated the sloppiness of how I showed up to get to the point that I needed in that room. And that, for me, that's that uh, public and private persona that needs to be addressed. But your point being discipline as an identity is something that I was able to rely on to ensure that I showed up the right way for myself.
And I think that part of that is because of those conversations you've had with yourself. And I think that spins it off to integrity with yourself. Because it's integrity when nobody's watching. It's having, real conversations with yourself about your standards, about what you need to achieve, so that when you get at that on that project or in that room or at the table, that preparation's already happened. And that integrity has now landed you here, and those inner conversations have now strengthened whatever perception or misperception you may have had, and you still can continue. You still continue those conversations despite doubt, et cetera, et cetera. But I think grounded in having some integrity with yourself equals integrity with others. It's sort of like integrity when no one's watching.
Yeah, it's the strongest routines to the point you made, which is extremely powerful in my own opinion. But the strongest routines in my life came when I stopped debating myself.
Mm.
Right? It was like, okay, you now cannot remove me from this pillar that I think I've established as relates to being somebody that should be in a particular space. The negativity side of my persona was just unarmed on a consistent basis. And we talk about standards a lot. Standards are structural, right? The
Mm-hmm.
motivation element is emotional. Once you start getting to understanding, if you set structural standards, a lot of these things can't pull you off. Success, listen, confidence, a lot of people think confidence comes from success. I think confidence comes from evidence,
Mm.
right? And you build on that evidence and the learnings that you have. Quite frankly, keeping promises to yourself builds evidence. And you talk
And
about integrity.
private habits become public results, which is exactly what you're saying. And if you're building those private habits, which are internal, which are your inner standards, if you're building those, they immediately show outward at work, in your personal life, wherever they may be.
Yeah.
You're starting with you, your own person, as the building block, and then branching off into the outward society. And I think sometimes what people do is they start outside and then work their way in, and it's
Hmm.
like that's not the road
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you're not built inside internally. So yeah, you may have all these, mighty walls out there, but then as those walls start to cave in, and then it filters through to your inner self, that's when you crack. And it's like, I think so I love what you're saying. It's important to start building from within, build that integrity, build those private habits, build all the things that you need to do, because then outwardly that pushes out and gives you a strong foundation, which is what we've been saying from the get-go.
The man, so here's one thing I've kind of realized. Uh, a mentor of mine, long time ago, who's also a family member, and just somebody I think so highly of. He's had a successful career in the investment space and lawyer degrees. Um, we were working out. So this tells you about how when you look at private habits,
Mhm.
where you're going, um, is we were in
Before
a
you go on,
space where,
we,
yeah,
we
yeah,
had we had that moment yesterday morning, didn't we? We were
we
both
did.
texting about the podcast today, and we were both doing the same thing, which was
Exactly.
building our inner strength,
You're building your
unbeknownst
inner
to each
strength.
other. But continue.
No, great point, right? You got to, when we talk about inner, from that standpoint, that's a part of it.
Absolutely.
But what really stuck with me for years, Uriel, for years,
Hmm.
it was kind of a throwaway comment, which was, "Are you going to continue to cheat yourself?"
Hmm.
Right? And I didn't really think about it in that way, that, you really take your foot off the gas a little bit when you get into certain spaces, you get on cruise control. You can, show up with vanity muscles, for lack of a better word, or vanity levels around. Some people work out for a bunch of different reasons. Some of that is to have their health numbers move in the range of where they want to. They want to show up a particular way, concerned with health, or just, something to do. But his poignant line to me was, "Are you going to continue to cheat yourself?" It was something that he was noticing from that standpoint. And he was like, "Don't cheat yourself. If you're in here and you got this time, use it to the max of your ability." Right. So what I learned from him, and I've always learned from him in our conversations, which is deeply personal to me, and he's been quite an inspiration in my career, is most successful men, they don't operate from magic. Right. They simply have systems that most people can never see or experience, especially if we consistently cheat ourselves by not establishing private habits that usually show up to where you're going and the point that you're making into public results, right? And it's because we allow things like chaos in our lives to push us back to comfort spaces. But what it also does during that period is it drains us of confidence. It truly does. And then when that starts breaking down and eroding, I don't care how great your package is, when your authentic self needs to show up, you become surfacey, and that people can see through that really, really quick, right? Especially as men, right? Emotionally, our discipline and our suppression that's attached to it, and where we go to seek health, doesn't always show up. You start eroding in that way your habits. The public will see it. Period. You can't hide from where he gets you from that
It's
standpoint, in my humble opinion.
100%. Um, it's who you are when nobody's impressed. And it's like it's like you're basically you are your North Star. And we're talking about inner standards, the standards you keep when you're alone, when no one's watching, the standards you have when, the piggy bank is there and nobody's there. Do you go in and take, the quarter, or do you just let it be? It's like how you speak to yourself, what you tolerate privately, the importance of alignment. I think all those things are key for building a strong inner standard that is your armor when you go outside into the world, and unbreakable. And you stand firm in your beliefs, in your practices. Nobody can bend that. It's like, and it goes back again to that conversation that I had when because we were talking and the person just, their observance was that I moved to the beat of my own drum.
Sure. Sure.
And the beat of your drum is not going to affect the beat of my drum, basically. And so it's like,
Huh.
and that's really what I feel is important to relay to those who are listening. Have a strong beat. Beat your own drum. Know what that beat is. Know its origin. Know its future. Know its past. Know where it stands now. I think that's important.
So can you espouse a little bit on a private habit that you have deployed regularly to
Mhm.
get you to where you are today?
I believe in self affirmations. So
Okay.
just if it's a big assignment I'm about to tackle, or a new project I'm about to start, I believe in affirming that it will be an amazing experience. I believe in affirming that I'll go into it and kick ass. I believe in affirming that, when I step out the door, it's on. It's like with gusto. And so those are some of the things that I say to myself as I say, maybe begin the day, or when I get to where I'm going, wherever the project is, before I start, I just have a little conversation with myself about where I see it going, about how I feel about it, about how I feel it'll end, strong. One of the things that was drilled to me early on in my career was always finish strong. So I look, when I go in, I look at the end and I look at finishing strong at the beginning, so.
The affirmation piece, which was extremely important, and I avoided that for a long time. Which once I started going down that path, it really does open your eyes on
Mhm.
opportunities. Unique thing for me that I've done was I found myself. I'm just going to throw this out there. I got tricked by social media early on.
Mhm.
I don't have any qualms saying it. Right. My thought was when I started
Social
getting,
media, when it first came on, was very addictive and appealing and alluring. Yeah.
and still is, right? Your
Mhm.
algorithms and everything is pulled in play. I
Yeah.
thought I had to go there to get all my news, all my insight, my daily bread, for lack of a better word. And it eventually ended up in this place of where you're doom scrolling everything. And you're doom scrolling inappropriate times. Like I would never in a million years thought I would have gotten there. It's like, oh my God, I've gone through a meeting and pulling from this standpoint, I'm about to go to lunch. Let's start looking to see what the latest thing is, or this latest news dopamine hit that I need to have, right? For the day. And then it started creeping into my morning routine. And my morning routine is I get up earlier than most, but what I want to do is give myself time to plan out and strategize my day. It becomes important on a Monday. I have a vision board of the week of what I want to attack from that standpoint. And then I got smart with everything going on from an AI based perspective. I didn't get this far in my career to get this far. I try to lean into scary, right? And a lot of us that aren't today and aren't 23 years old and going down path, and we're hoping that we have a lot of 20 some year olds that are looking for some guidance that are paying attention to us. I'm jealous of you because of the amount of time that's afforded to you and the amount of resources that are afforded to you. And the fact that in many instances, y'all are all starting at equal level playing field for the first time ever in our lives, right? You need to be taking advantage of it. So I'm leaning into scary for somebody like myself that's done this for a lot of years. I have a lot of the experience, but I need to get the experience with the tools. I try to, a private habit of mine is I try to make sure I use the early morning time for me as a learning phase. So before I start doom scrolling, I've gone through my week early in the week. And then each and every day, I'm going back. Am I hitting these milestones and goals? What did I do to do that? And what veered me off course, right? So I have a plan and strategy all week long so that I have some kind of foundation as I'm building and going throughout the week. I can ultimately go towards my end of week goal where I then capture what I've done successful for the week and where I have opportunities for the week. And it's kind of what I call a brag book, right? So I note all these things for myself and says, here's what I've accomplished. You know what this makes this really easy? When I'm having to do reviews, because what happens with reviews right now, for those of us that employees, you spend all year trying to make sure that you're tracking milestones that individuals have hit and where they're off path, and what can you do to help them for that. It's important that you do it for yourself, right? And I had it ended up veering into not only professional but personal. What are some things I can be doing that has me show up the right way for my family? So that was my personal, and what started happening, quite frankly, is calendar management got better. I started realizing I was protecting myself a little bit in my mental space around how I showed up on a day-to-day basis. And I started moving a little bit more away from the media consumption, although I'd be lying to you if I say I don't get on there quite a bit. I have drawn back a bit, but that was something that helped me, from a private habit perspective, that kind of righted the ship for me a little bit.
I think that you just put a nail on the head, hit the nail on the head. It's important to audit your private habits, not your public image. And I think if you are auditing, which is basically what you just described, what you're doing and how you're doing it privately, it just makes your public facing person stronger. And I think that is one of the things, the key takeaway from what we're trying to impart is how do you present stronger? How do you, walk in with all that confidence? How do you just ooze whatever it is that you think needs to be oozed? And it starts from that inner standard, that inner strength, that discipline, that building routines privately that affect public associations and public displays of wherever you are, whether it be in your personal life or at work or, at, whatever functions you may be partaking in. And I think that for me, that's extremely important, auditing your private habits. Um, I want to just share a story of when I felt I was, I guess, my inner and outer standards had crashed. Um, and it was right after college, and I was like high flying and had this high profile job. Was working for a network, and then it all came crashing down, um, and I was unemployed, and there were no prospects of getting another high profile job
Uh,
anytime soon. And so a colleague of mine worked at the accounting firm Ernst and Young, and she was like, "Hey, there's an opening in the mailroom," and I was crushed.
mm,
And so I had to wrestle with myself and have a serious conversation with myself. Do I continue on uh, jobless, penniless, on the verge of losing my apartment, or take this job, albeit in the mailroom, even though I just, I have a master's degree and et cetera, and it was just, you know, so you have to have those hard-hitting conversations with yourself, which I did. And my standard was take the job. And I took it, and it was, how can I describe it? It was a life-changing experience because what it did was it taught me humility, and it also taught me humor, because the guys I worked with didn't give a shit whether I had a master's degree or
or not. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's cute.
not.
That's cute. I've heard that before.
They,
People go, that's cute.
they, they took you down every peg and more if you just crossed the line. And so, what could have been a personal tragedy um, turned into actually a triumph. Um, and I really grew in that space. despite it not being the space I want it to be. And eventually I use it as a building block to get somewhere else. But the key to that story is mental fortitude and having the honest conversations with yourself as to what direction you go in and not being stuck in it must be this way. And I think that that's very important. And it again, it's about parsing internally your course correction.
There's an element of where the humbleness component that you just referenced, it gets into men often associating vulnerability with a loss of respect, right? So a lot of
Mhm.
men are being honest not only with the general public but themselves. Kind of feel from what I've experienced will reduce how people see them. So we lie. What was the comment refrain that people usually say? Fake it till you make it. That's it. That's it. Fake it till you make it. From that standpoint, a lot of people are doing that, and I don't begrudge people that go down that path and have that mentality. But you end up faking it so much that you never know when you really need to be honest about your situation,
Mhm.
right? Because the one of the scariest things that has come across, and I have friends that deal in the mental health spaces. You think about just in the U.S. alone, overwhelmingly, a majority of suicides in the United States are by men. But yet, and still,
Mhm.
we're less likely to seek mental health support. That gets into these places where the situation that you just presented isn't traumatic necessarily, but it is extremely humbling. And if you
Mhm.
don't have the mental fortitude to deal with that and say, okay, I'm going to move ahead, I'm going to, take it for what it is, learnings on how to grow professionally. Some people have allowed that to end them, right?
Mhm.
So that's why I really liked when you brought up this thought and conversations, because I think that's why conversations like this matter. A lot of men are suffering silently while we're still out there putting on a brave face
Mhm.
because of our families and we got to pay bills and we have to do X, Y, and Z. And when you get busted down pegs in some instances, and you're like, oh my God, things are about to change, but you still have to put this brave face on. We suffer in that silence, and unfortunately, it leads to areas where you can never come back from. And that's what we're hoping doesn't happen to a lot of the folks that we bring into our community and our conversations. Is we're here to listening ears and tell you we've been through some of this stuff. The same reference that you've had around a loss of opportunity. If you've been in the corporate structure forever, you're one or two decisions in some room to where you're about to be displaced, and you have to figure out how to bounce back. Hopefully you've leveraged your network. You've shown up in ways that show your value. You've allowed all the noise to be eliminated to make that happen. So you're able to land quickly, but it doesn't always happen in that way. And if you don't have the true internal strength, the habits, and you've built yourself up, and you're able to have that emotional conversation on a consistent basis, you have that grounding, it can end up in a very, very bad place. And that's why, again, I think these type of conversations like this matter. A lot of
Yeah,
people
I
suffering
think
in
that
silence.
yeah, and I think that the key is it's okay to talk about it.
Yeah.
And it's okay to work on your inner standard. Like we're not ascribing or saying you need to be perfect. I firmly believe a standard is not something you announce, that it's something you maintain. And maintenance is work. It's work. It's processing what is the right direction for you. It's having a real conversation with yourself. And if we keep repeating it, it's building yourself up and making yourself stronger so that when you go out and you what's the word, you experience
Hmm.
the world at hand or at large, you have something to fall back on because it's a cruel world, it's a tough world. And if you don't have that inner fortitude and inner strength, inner standard that's been built up strong, you're easily crushed. Uh, I think one of the things that we're trying to say is, here's how we did it. It may not necessarily work for you, but this is what worked for me.
It's to your point. What's really cool to see, and I'll talk about this in more detail around not just me and some of our mentees have come across, and especially in executive environments. Eventually, we talk about that whole private discipline. You
Mhm.
gotta love it when it starts showing up publicly, and you see it in others that you've had a chance to lead to that space. So I've had
Mhm.
mentees where their decision making, their emotional control, their leadership presence finally showed up when they got a team. I have a long-term mentee, a female mentee of mine, who's been an amazing. We've had an amazing mentor-mentee relationship. So become a close friend of mine. Has done an amazing job in the corporate marketing space. Has done amazing jobs for a large-scale financial institution with their branding, commercials. A lot of the commercials you see have been done under their charge. And it's always what I love about her is she's always had a youthfulness as she's gotten older and older in her career. She's had this youthfulness concept that has really stuck with her, which really makes her seem like someone who always has this joy in phase and always excitement measured in her approach and all of that. And when you show up in certain rooms, it's a person you gravitate towards, and she's got everything
Mhm.
together, right, to make that happen. And she was recently blessed for the first time in her career. She's always managed on the fringes, like dotted line accountability and corporate. It's giving you a team without giving you a team, so you're responsible for engaging with
Mhm.
people, but you don't manage them. You don't get the compensation associated. The old trick from that
Mhm.
standpoint. But because of how she was able to ensure that she had the right habits, she showed up well. She was able to articulate and volunteer for in different ways that she really closed the loop on her internal self, and she was really honest with where she needed attention. She paid attention and attacked gaps that she had. When she finally got her team, she got hit, and the way that she got her team is she had individuals that she was peers with, and all of a sudden she became their manager, which is unique. It happens, but not unique. It happens in corporate all the time. You all of a sudden take lead on your friends, and confidants to a degree, and folks that have been in the struggle with you. And you've got to make sure that that line of demarcation becomes apparent rather quickly, because what tends to happen is, hey, I'm being managed by my friend. It allows an element of comfortability and sloppiness to start rearing its ugly head. Well, my whole point is because she established the private habits, she was able to see, and I was able to see, quite frankly, in the ways that she dealt with certain things, because we maintained that relationship, the emotional control when things came up that hit her, when individuals challenging her leadership, and the fact that she got that role, and the conversations and the way she was able to respond, and still had that engagement going to where people are actually still wanting to remain on the team. The fact that she was able to kind of keep this leadership presence, even though she's taken over a new project, taken over a new group that's challenging her directly, she was able to show, listen, I can manage that and still manage this, which is what you all are expecting me from an objective based perspective. And it really was based off of her decision making, and she was very intentional and purposeful. You brought up this point around due diligence, around the way that you manage and maintain yourself. She had that, so the decision making just clicked. So I was able to see that in all her interactions. I had the benefit of engaging with her in meetings, and I was like, look at the shine. Look, if you get this thing right and you're disciplined and your private habits are sound and secure, and you've got yourself to where you're starting on second or third base relative to all the other trappings that matter, man, this stuff it is a beauty to see, quite frankly, because it ends up showing up publicly. It always does.
Yeah. And that's a great example of your inner standard shining outward. And it's like, it's as simple as that. And, I couldn't express it any better.
Every the and this goes back to the point that my cousin brought up to me, um, and I live by this. Every shortcut that you take leaves a residue. If you're going to start taking shortcuts to get you to different places, so you move to the path of least resistance, it will leave a residue, and enough of that residue being left, it will leave you behind. That's the whole point that I think y'all need to take away from this.
That's an excellent place to stop and take away from the conversation. And we hope that you will tune in next time for our fourth podcast. So thank you for listening.
Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate your support, and I'm hoping these conversations are resonating with individuals that need to hear it. There's a reason that you've joined in on this community message as we pull through, and we're doing this as a community. Our overall goal is provide perspectives on where we're coming from in our respective industries, giving you insight. There's different ways of hitting certain standards, but quite frankly, there are regimented processes you need to understand that will help you, right? Show up publicly the way that you want to. Managing a brand is extremely important. It is extremely necessary on your path towards success, whatever that success may be, whether in a professional or personal space. And our goal here is to help you get these things aligned and start establishing the necessary steps to make that happen. And we're hoping we're connecting on that. There's a lot more conversations that happen relative to that, in addition to other voices that we're going to look to bring in to tackle that with us.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening.
Have a great one.